Recording in progress.
Chairperson. Okay, thanks. Okay, thank you. Good morning, honorable members and colleagues. I just want to let you know that the chairperson was in the meeting now, and then she lost connectivity. She is trying to rejoin the meeting. Please forgive her. She will be with us anytime from now. Thank you.
My apologies for that, colleagues. I thought I am in a well-covered place when it comes to network, but it's like I was struggling, so I had to change gadget. My apologies for that. As I was saying, you are all welcome to the meeting, colleagues. I know the invitation was extended to provinces, and all of you in the meeting, you are welcome. Mr. Nodada, can I get an indication whether all members are on the platform? If we have apologies, kindly deal with the apologies.
Thank you, Chairperson. Good morning, Chairperson and members. Good morning, colleagues. Chairperson, we only have 5 members so far. It's yourself, Honorable Numalo, Honorable Brits, Honorable Ryder, Honorable Majola, Just a second, I just want to check Honorable Swart. Oh, and Honorable Swart, Chairperson. So we have got enough members to start the meeting, Chairperson. Chair, there are members from provincial legislatures who have joined, but we received an apology from the Honorable Chairperson of the Northern Cape, Honorable Davids. From the committee's side, we have an apology from Honorable Khadebe. He's going to be with us, but he's going to leave the meeting at 10 o'clock. Honorable Ndlovu indicated that he might be in and out of the meeting because there is another meeting that she needs to attend. Thank you so much, Chair.
Thank you very much, colleagues. Thank you, Mr. Nodada. Honorable members and colleagues on the platform, today marks a very crucial point in our oversight journey as we engage with the PBO, which is one of the Parliament's most strategic partners. Colleagues, this engagement comes at a time when we are considering the key instruments of our public finances, which are the three proposed bills: the Division of Revenue Bill, the Appropriation Bill, and the Public Sector Pension and Related Payments Bill. This bill lies at the heart of government service delivery agenda. It is therefore essential that we use this opportunity, members, to ask sharp strategic questions and ensure that the 2025 budget proposals respond effectively to our country's socio-economic challenges. Colleagues, I am not going to waste time. I am looking forward to the insights and guidance of PBO, as they will be helping us in deepening our oversight and strengthening Parliament's role in shaping a more responsive and people-centered budget. Having said that, colleagues, I am going to invite Dr. Jantjies to lead us on their presentation, colleagues. And I must indicate to the meeting that today we'll only be dealing with the PBO. Tomorrow we'll take the FFC to allow members enough time to engage on the advice and the insight that we'll be getting from the PBO and the FFC. So today it's only the PBO, then we'll be joined by the FFC tomorrow. Over to you, Dr. Jantjies.
Good morning, Chairperson. Thank you so much. Good morning, honored members. Thank you so much for the opportunity. We are with the team here. I think somebody's sharing the slides. I would really appreciate this opportunity. Who's sharing the slides, Nelia? Members have already got the presentation. We really appreciate that.
Yeah, Luwazi is sharing.
All right, thanks. Luwazi, flag it in this regard. So we will focus certainly, Chair, on look at different roles of the spheres, just to remind members different roles of the spheres. But also importantly, as we've always done, Chair, members, we often set the context from which the Division of Revenue and Appropriations Bill are set out, which really what is social context and how the budget is likely to improve on those. We'll show some of the trends on the spending in the three spheres and highlight the impact of the Division of Revenue and Appropriations Bill appropriations as well. We'll look at the financial health and challenges facing local government sectors, no problems, and so on. Are we winning with the slide? Maybe we should give that Nodada to help us flag it in the meantime. I'm moved on to the third slide now on the functions of the three spheres. Remember, it's always important to align or know the responsibilities, and when we look at the budget, the three spheres, national, provincial government have the leadership and formulating policy space and oversight, of course, that's the nation over the provinces and the local spheres as well. The national government is exclusively responsible for functions that serve the national interest and the best centralized providing for national defense, safety, and higher education. And when you look at the Division of Revenue, we need to take that into account. And appropriations were particularly the appropriations focus a lot at the national sphere. Provincial and local government receive equitable shares and conditional grants to enable them to provide basic services and perform their functions in that regard. I'm on slide 4. Slide number 5. We do also remember the revenue raising capacity of three spheres. The national has the largest responsibilities in raising national revenue. We know in the Money Bills Act that's emphasized in the Constitution as well, that the Minister of Finance is the one who can propose money bills, so it's very responsibility there. The revenue generated by the national is shared amongst the spheres, and the nation has the largest spending responsibilities, and thereof receives quite a large portion of the share. Of course, there's been discussion around the formula itself. The portion of the national share is also shared by the state-owned entities, public entities, and provide facilities on behalf of government. And that's another aspect which we've raised over time, that even within this oversight role, there has to be a point where we recognize that a portion that goes to the state-owned entities and public entities, which we need as a sector oversight of those. The provinces has limited raising revenue capacity, but significant spending responsibilities. Therefore, they receive the second largest portion of the national raised revenue. And municipalities, they are expected that they should raise more revenue. And we do recognize there's been debate discussions in terms of how far that has been effective, given the recent developments in our societies and also our economic situation in this regard. The next slide really is to highlight some of the key issues that we also want to bring forward. In this regard, the need to ensure that better alignment between the planning, it's always going to be important, reinforce the critical needs for the convergence and alignment between the planning and the budget inside, and that within the budget framework. Addressing the escalating cost of living is one of the key priorities. It's also set out in MTDP. Cost of living has demonstrably worsened over the years, placed significant dependence on particularly low-income households. It is therefore crucial that the Parliament process uses its authority to ensure that government policies and crucially the budget that underpins them do not necessarily cause more burden in societies. We welcome increased spending in the key functions. We welcome the notable minimal increase in spending of key functions group outlined in the budget compared to in the MTBP. This increase signals a commitment to addressing critical societal needs and post-recession services. Some concern around the policing budget itself. We look at headcount versus the crime trends. We are concerned about the slow growth in the headcount when again juxtaposed against the persistent and in some cases rising crime rates in our society. Some of the challenges in education, teacher shortage, and infrastructure backlog, we see that over the past decades, the national learner-teacher ratio has deteriorated over time, slightly went down, with some of the provinces experiencing particularly more declines in this regard. This underscores the importance of the urgent need to both infrastructure and support in the hiring of teachers at the provincial level. The need to address critical gaps in healthcare, also important. Workforce and infrastructure deficiencies are in place. The issue of director-patient ratios and so many other concerns feel it's important, and this committee has a role to play in ensuring that the budget is able to address some of these key issues. Chair and members, I will stop here and come back later to give the team to take us through the presentation as a whole. And thank you so much, members and chairperson and colleagues. Colleagues, take us through. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Janjis. Honorable Chair and honorable members, I'm going to take you through the policy and funding priorities for the 2025 budget. Next slide, please. So, honorable members, in terms of the policy priorities of the Government of National Unity, the State of the Nation Address provided a strategic direction for the 2025 budget. So, actions in the 2025-2029 medium-term development plan will advance the GNU street strategic priorities, which are to drive inclusive growth and job creation, to reduce poverty and tackle high cost of living, to build a capable, ethical, and developmental state. So the medium-term economic strategy is anchored by 4 priorities, as indicated in the Budget 301. A predictable economic environment reduces susceptible to macroeconomic shocks, supports sustained economic growth, and facilitate a reduction in poverty, inequality, and encourages investment and consumption spending by firms and households, boosting economic growth. To increase efficiency and promote a competitive
economy through improved confidence and investment while addressing constrained job creation and employment, to identify and solve problems in the delivery of core functions, enhancing accountability and service delivery supported by digital transformation, and support industrial growth, promotes innovation and attracts foreign investment, and also to improve infrastructure, improves productivity, placing the economy on a higher growth trajectory. So the tables in the next two slides show a direct flow from some of the presidential pronouncements which were made during the State of the Nation address to the budget. But there are, however, pronouncements which are made by the president which are not directly responded to, and others which are in the budget priorities which were now pronounced during the SONA. Next slide. Okay, this one. So this slide, we presented this during the budget 201. So I'm just going to concentrate on what changed with the budget 301. For example, when we look in terms of infrastructure, so infrastructure over the medium term, 1.3 trillion will be allocated to public infrastructure with major allocations to roads, which is 402 billion for roads, energy 219.2 billion, and water and sanitation 156.3 billion. The main budget adds to 33.7 billion for infrastructure project over the medium term. Next slide. So what changed in terms of this? We saw the president announced an immediate focus to expand access to early childhood development for every child. So the budget responded by an allocation of 19.5 billion for provincial education compensation costs, which will safeguard about 5,500 posts, and for improved access to quality ECD. So the ECD subsidy, unchanged since 2019 at 17 Rand per child, will be increased to 24 Rand per child per day. Additional funding of 10 billion over the medium term will expand ECD access to an additional 700,000 children up to the age of 5 years old. And also the president announced in terms of wanting to making sure that everyone in the nation is safe. So when we look at the allocation for Defense Force and Correctional Services, 9.4 billion was allocated to fund this function, and the allocation to SNDF for the Southern African Development Community Mission in the DRC has been adjusted according to the SNDF phased withdrawal plan. So while the medium-term allocation is reduced, the 2025-2026 allocation is increased relative to the March 2025 to cover the immediate withdrawal costs. And also the president pronounced that proceed with the preparation work for the establishment of the NHI. A vital part of this is modernization, improved and maintenance of existing health facilities, and the construction of new hospitals and clinics. So over the medium term, there is the budget responded over the MTEF period. The indirect and direct conditional grants for NHI are allocated 8.5 billion and 1.4 billion respectively. The health sector is provisionally allocated 20.8 billion to cover the compensation and essential services. This funding will be facilitated to the employment of 800 doctors who have finished their community services, to safeguard about 4,700 health posts, and to address shortages in the medical goods, services, and accruals. An additional 1.4 billion is earmarked for the construction of Siloam Hospital and the implementation of private and public partnership, health technology, and the Tigerberg Hospital. So we saw also the SRD grant as an essential mechanism for alleviating extreme poverty, as the president announced, and the budget responded that they will be extending the SRD grant by a year to the end of March 2026, with 35.2 billion allocated for this purpose. Next slide. I'll hand over to the next presenter. Thank you.
Good morning, honorable members. I will be taking you through the situation analysis, which we've updated with the most recent available data. The purpose of this section is to outline the socioeconomic realities facing South Africa. So as you consider the division of revenue, the appropriations bill, and other bills within the context of Budget 3.0, your deliberations are grounded within the lived experiences of South Africans on the ground. On this slide, members, this slide lays bare the cost of living crisis at the most basic level. If you look at the bottom two bars on the graph, the average cost of household food basket has now risen nominally from nominally to 5,374 Rand, up from 5,302 Rand in 2024. And it's likely to increase further even without factoring the fuel levy. This increase is higher than the increase that was proposed for foster care and child support grant recipients for this financial year. From the graph, members, it's evident that minimum wage earners and households that are reliant on grants as their main source of income are unable to afford necessities with their current income. The initial proposal to increase the VAT and expand the list of zero-rated food items has been withdrawn and replaced with an inflationary fuel levy increase and no adjustments to the income tax bracket. Our concern, members, is that this will directly squeeze an already tight household budget. Next slide, please. Members, what we would like to highlight with this slide is that South African households are not resilient, but rather they are drowning in debt. Data from the Reserve Bank's recent quarterly bulletin shows that the average household owes 62 cents for every Rand of disposable income they have. For low-income households, the situation is even dire, as the graph clearly illustrates. For low-income households, over 69% of their income is spent just on pure survival. This is on housing, food, and electricity. And when transport costs are factored in, this increases to 75%. There's simply no fat to trim. Therefore, any new price increases poses a threat to the stability of these families. Next slide, please. Members, on this slide, this graph was put together using data from the Peter Maritzburg Economic Justice and Dignity Group. And if we look at 2025, we see that for a worker earning minimum wage, over half of their salary, which is 53%, is already consumed by just transport and electricity. Our concern is that the fuel levy increase will directly into what little they have left. We further want to highlight that this isn't just a household issue, it's an economic one. The fuel levy is likely to drive up costs in key job-creating sectors like agriculture and manufacturing. This is particularly concerning for the manufacturing industry, which we must highlight is already in a state of a crisis. In agriculture, the impact is direct. For farmers, fuel constitutes up to 13% of production costs for crops such as grain and oilseed. And members, these crops, which is grains and oilseeds, are input ingredients for household staples like bread, cooking oil, and maize. And so our primary concern is that an increase in the fuel cost is likely to increase production costs, which will inevitably be passed on to consumers. Next slide, please. Members, on this slide, we want to highlight the current economic pressure is creating a social crisis. We have over 9.2 million people experiencing hunger, as shown by the orange bar. Even more alarming is the severe acute malnutrition in children under 5 years old, which according to the DG Mary Trust has increased by 26% over the past 5 years. What this tells us is that we are risking the health and the productivity of the future generation. The graph at the bottom right hand shows a worrying trend that the reliance on salaries as a main source of income is decreasing, while the reliance on social grants is growing. This signals a shrinking capacity of our economy to provide stable and dignified employment. Next slide, please. Members, to understand why the revenue-raising measures that were proposed are a key concern, we must consider the reality of our inequality. A key measure of this is the Gini coefficient, which in simple terms is an index from 0 to 1 that measures how evenly income is shared. A score of 0 demonstrates perfect equality, while a score of 1 represents perfect inequality. A high number means a more unequal society. The top graph shows South Africa's Gini Gini is at 0.63. For us, this means a huge portion of our population has little to no financial resilience to absorb the price shocks. Now, the graph on the bottom shows that inequality has a racial structure. Specifically, 73% of white-headed households are located in the high-income quintile compared to Black households, where only 14% are in the same top bracket. Therefore, our concern is that the measures such as an increase in the fuel levy may risk deepening inequalities along racial as well as gender lines. Next slide, please. Members, since the onset of austerity measures in 2012, South Africa's official unemployment rate increased from 24.9% to now 32.9%. If you include those who have given up looking for work, the figure increases from 35.6% to 43.1% over the same period. The burden of unemployment falls heaviest on our youth and on women, with rates far above the national average. Members, it's worth noting that many countries that have higher petrol prices than South Africa exhibit a bit of a better economic resilience. And a key indicator of this resilience is the unemployment rate, which based on the available 2024 data range from approximately 1% to 13.3%. So the economies in these countries generate jobs and income, allowing citizens to absorb some of the costs, and our economy does not. So we want to emphasize that if we do not confront the systemic challenges such as market concentration and deindustrialization, supply side reforms alone will not create jobs our people desperately need. Next slide, please. Members, in terms of safety, while the budget for police is increasing nominally, the number of funded police posts will remain the same for the next 3 years, which you will see on the next slide. Specifically, the number of funded police posts remains unchanged at over 188,000. This represents a reduction of over 9,800 posts since 2012. This is happening while South Africa recorded more than 63 murders per day, according to the latest quarterly statistic. And this is a very high number for a country that's not actively engaged in a war. Next slide, please. On the slide, members, we show that although the budget for police is increasing in nominal terms, the number of funded police posts is set to remain flat over the medium term. The orange graph below shows that the police to population ratio is expected to get worse. This means there'll be fewer police officers, to protect a growing population. Next slide, please. Members, this slide shows that our higher education system is facing a major capacity challenge. In the presentation we made in April, we shared that over 135,000 matriculants with bachelor passes could not get your university placement as of January of this year. We made an example with the University of Johannesburg where we shared that there were over 360,000 applicants from prospective first-year students, but the university was only able to enroll 10,500 students as of January of 2025. Despite this challenge, the budget tabled in May reduced the budget for subsidies for university infrastructure from nearly 3 billion to around 1.4 billion rand. This places immense pressure on the ability of universities to expand and to provide the necessary resources such as affordable student housing. The graph above shows that the percentage of young people that are aged 18 to 29 enrolled in higher education is declining. If we pair this graph with the context that I've just provided, one can view this decline of enrollment it's not driven by a shortage of willing and qualified students, but rather by a shortage of the system's capacity to accommodate students, among other possible factors. Next slide, please. Honorable members, the next two slides that show that despite the nominal increase in funding allocation, our education system is facing a serious challenge. Specifically, Budget 3.0 provisionally allocated 19.5 billion rand over the MTEF to safeguard approximately 5,500 educator posts and improve access to ECD. Although the increase is a positive step in the right direction, it does fall short of repairing the years of spending reductions which have contributed to the pressures provincial education departments continue to face with teacher shortages, infrastructure challenges, and even difficulties in implementing mandatory directives. In 2024, we had over 31,400 unfilled educator posts in provincial education departments, with the highest numbers concentrated in KZN, Eastern Cape, and Limpopo. Moreover, the national average learner to educator ratio, as Dr. Yankees pointed out, has risen to 35 learners per educator, up from 33 learners per educator in 2014. Notably, the three provinces, namely Limpopo, Mpumalanga, and Western Cape, had higher learner to educator ratios that were above the national average. Next slide, please. On this slide, what we would like to highlight, members, is that the national and even provincial average marks disparities, as less resource schools often experience much larger class sizes. Furthermore, we want to make you aware that of the infrastructure backlog that has worsened over the past decade. For example, the Department of Basic Education was unable to construct or replace any schools in the Eastern Cape, in Free State, in Limpopo, and Northwest in the 2023-2024 financial year. This represents a stark decline from 2014 and 2015, when over 30 schools were completed in the Eastern Cape and 13 in Limpopo. And so our view is that we are underfunding a fundamental human right and possibly contributing to a developmental crisis. Next slide, please. Honorable members, on this slide, we want to draw your attention to the real effects of the budget on South Africans by examining how inflation and how population growth are considered in the spending for basic education. When comparing the budget tabled last year and Budget 3.0, the figure shows that the per learner spending on basic education is projected to increase in real terms over the medium term. In this financial year, the real per capita spending is set at 17,698 Rand per learner. The spending is projected to rise to 17,804 Rand by 2027-2028. While this increase is noted, our fundamental concern still remains on whether the modest increase is anywhere near sufficient to address the backlogs and the gaps we've just presented, and importantly, to improve the learning outcomes, particularly in under-resourced schools. Next slide, please. Turning to healthcare, members, the slide lays bare the alarming reality of South Africa's healthcare system. In the Budget 2.0, we shared that we have only one doctor for over 3,000 patients, which is far below the WHO identified minimum standard. This is made worse by the fact that we lost nearly 9,000 healthcare workers last year, as mentioned in Budget 2.0, as well as highlighted by the South African Medical Association. Currently, the number of newly qualified doctors outpaced the proposed funding allocation. Specifically, there are approximately 1,800 newly qualified junior doctors who are unemployed. However, the budget provides funding for 800 of them. The funding allocation is simply not enough to address the infrastructure backlog, and the graph on the right shows where households, it shows where households turn to when they get sick or injured, and the majority of those households rely on public healthcare system for their immediate needs. Next slide, please. Members, having provided the context of the state of the healthcare system, we now turn to the real per capita spending on health. In the medium term, the total real per capita spending on health is set to increase. The graph below shows that for this financial year, the total real per capita spending on health stands at 3,271 Rand per person. However, members, there are two critical factors that are not included in this government spending plans. First is the spending on military health service. Second is the funding for organizations on the front line of the HIV epidemic, which have historically been supported by the US PEPFAR program. So the withdrawal of this funding suggests that our healthcare system may face further strain rather than relief. Next slide, please. Members, as you're aware, local government is a sphere of government that's closest to the people and has an important function in providing basic services to communities. The graph above shows a worrying trend that in the case of water and refuse disposal, the number of people without these services has grown over the past decade, as shown by the gray bar. We do acknowledge that there has been progress that's been made in connecting more households to electricity and increasing the provision of basic sanitation. However, we do note that despite this progress, we seem to be moving backward if one considers the quality of service of this the quality of this basic service. Next slide, please. Members, in 2001, South Africa adopted the Free Basic Service Policy, which was meant to provide free basic services to poorer households. Unfortunately, that is failing as demonstrated by the light green bar. Millions of households that are eligible for free services have not been getting them. This figure has worsened over the past decade. If we take water, for example, the number of households receiving free water has been cut by almost 50% between 2013 and 2023. I'll take the next point on the next slide, please. On this slide, members, we show a more disaggregated view of the provision of free basic services by provinces over the past 10 years. If we use the provision of free water again as an example, which is the first two columns, we see that the proportion of households that benefited from this policy is declining across all provinces. These are some of the, there are provinces that are performing more worse than others, of course. And lastly, we would like to raise to you members that our country lost nearly half of clean and treated water last year due to leaks, poor maintenance, and a collapsing infrastructure. Budget 3.0's proposals for the private sector, for the involvement of private sector in mobilizing resources is noted. However, we caution that the long-term affordability of water for poor citizens must be the absolute priority. I'll hand over the next section to Dr. Orlandi.
Thank you and good morning, honorable members and guests. I'm Nelia Orlandi, and I'll take you through the Division of Revenue and Appropriations. Next slide. So, members, in terms of the Division of Revenue Bill, the first table shows the vertical split of nationally raised revenue between the three spheres of government. The national share includes conditional grants to provinces and local government, the general fuel levy, sharing with metropolitan municipalities, debt service cost, the contingency reserve, and provisional allocations. The detail of the horizontal division of conditional grants and other items between provinces and municipalities are shown in the annexures to the Division of Revenue Bill. The second table shows how the proportions of the allocations change when the conditional grants and fuel levy are included in the provincial and local government numbers. These proportions are calculated on the non-interest allocations, excluding the provisional allocations. Next slide. Members, the Division of Revenue allocates 49.2% to the national sphere, 41.3% to provinces, and 9.5% to local government. Estimates are to increase the proportion allocated to local government to 9.7% in 27-28. The nominal changes to the provincial equitable share since the 2024 MTEF is 5.7 billion in 2025 and 4.8 billion in 2026. And this is growing by 4.8% over the 2025 medium term. Previous provisions was that it should grow or would grow by 3.9%. Next slide. Members, this slide is only showing the diagrams show the actual outcomes for 21, 22, 22, 23, and 23, 24, as well as the estimates for 24, 25, and 25, 26. So you can see the growth of the local government's share of a period of time. Next slide. Members, the nominal growth of the 2025 MTEF is 3.2% for national departments when using the preliminary outcomes figures, and 5.5% for the total spending when the provisional allocations and contingency reserves are included over the medium term. Growth is 4.5% for provinces and 4.4% for local government. The diagram shows the real per capita actual and estimated spending per economic classification over the medium term. Next slide. Members, conditional grants transferred from national departments. These tables have been updated with the preliminary outcomes for 2024-25. So you can just to a note in terms of agriculture, the preliminary outcome is slightly lower than the revised estimate on the provincial side. On the local government slide, you can see the preliminary outcome for corporate governance is slightly higher than the revised estimate, slightly lower for transport, and it's slightly higher for water and sanitation. Members, the largest proportion of conditional grants is going to provinces for education, health, human settlements, and transport. The largest proportion of conditional grants to municipalities is for municipal infrastructure, human settlements. A new urban development financing grant has been introduced to operate as a performance-based finance incentive grant for metros to achieve, amongst others, social cohesion and forge partnerships. To leverage third-party capital investments and investing their own revenues. Members, these kind of incentive grants might have unintended consequences, such as increased rates and taxes to reflect higher own revenue spending. Next slide. Conditional grants to provinces. The green column shows the changes between the preliminary outcomes and the 2025-26 allocation. The negative and very high changes is as a result of the revisions in terms of the merging of grants. For example, if you look at the first one, the Comprehensive Agriculture Support Program decreases by 16.5%, but the ILEMA grant increased by 51.1%. These two grants will be merged over a period of time. Next slide. The conditional grants to municipalities. The grey line shows the new grant that was mentioned on the previous slide. You can see the new grant is the Urban Development Financing Grant, and it's basically a shift from the Neighbourhood Development Partnership Grant over the medium term. Next slide. Next. Members, the Treasury updated the tables by including the preliminary outcomes for 2024-25 on the appropriations. The column in the middle shows the percentage spent of the adjusted budget. The table further shows the national appropriations that increased by more than inflation in 25-26 from the preliminary 2024-25 outcomes. Most of the increases include funding for the implementation of the 2025 Public Sector Wage Agreement, the COVID-19 SRD grant, modernisation of SARS, Teacher Assistance Program, the South African National Roads Agency for debt repayment, and the maintenance backlog for the Gauteng Freeway Improvement Project. The Passenger Rail Agency of South Africa for the rolling stock, fleet renewal, the South African National Defence Force for the withdrawal of the troops, and the IDC received funding for the Social Employment Fund. I've also highlighted on this slide, we can highlight the over and underspending. The presidency has spent 102.2%. In terms of planning, monitoring, and evaluation, they are a bit under. They've only spent 86.8%. And then further down, we'll also see small business development. They've spent 87.8%. Trade and industry is currently showing overspending. They've spent 101.7% in terms of the preliminary numbers, and land reform and rural development only spent 89.8%. Next slide. Members, this table is showing the characteristics of a selection of national appropriations, including direct charges. In total, national departments allocated 31.9% of their budgets to current spending, of which 9.6% is for compensation of employees. 66.9% are allocated for transfers and subsidies, which is an ongoing trend, but should be noted that it includes the equitable shares, conditional grants, and social grants. 0.7% is allocated to capital expenditure on a national level. So members, normally we divide the appropriations between departments that transfer more than 60% of their allocation and those that transfer less than 60%. This characteristic of a budget determines the way in which budgets are analysed and also the way in which oversight is done. Next slide. Members, just to link our conversation of transfers to an example, we use the Department of Sport, Arts and Culture to show what it actually means in practice. The department transfers 80.9% of its budget, of which provinces receive transfers in the form of 2 provincial conditional grants. 35 departmental agencies receive current transfers and 17 receive funds for capital spending. Higher education institutions receive for human language technologies projects, and 11 foreign governments and international organizations receive transfers for current spending. 5 public corporations and private enterprises receive transfers for current spending, and 16 non-profit institutions receive transfers for current spending. Next slide. The Department of Sports, Arts and Culture, in addition to the budget program structure with personnel numbers of 605, the department also has 10 public entities that provide services on behalf of the department. These entities has its own financial statements and personnel structures. Salaries of CEOs vary between 1.3 million and 3 million. A list of the public entities is shown in the table below. Next slide. Members, the table shows a key set of indicators linked to the main focus of the department contributing to outcome 15, social cohesion and national building of the 2024 medium-term development plan. The department, however, is also mandated to contribute to outcome 1, increased employment and work opportunities through the creative sector stimulus program. A target of 40,000 work opportunities has been set for the end of the medium-term development plan period for this department, which are not reflected in the key set of indicators in the budget. Next slide. Another example is the Department of Science and Technology and Innovation. The budget program structure with personnel numbers of 356 in 25-26 provides for admin, technology innovation, international cooperation and resources, research development and support, and socioeconomic innovation partnerships. In terms of the personnel structure, it is noted that each program includes a sub-program for the Office of the Deputy Director General, which is an unique practice, while the salaries of the DDGs are reflected under Program 1 administration as other. The approved establishment only provides for 4 funded positions under the other category, while 5 positions are filled. The department also has 6 public entities that provide services on behalf of the department. These entities has its own financial statements and personnel structures. The salaries of the CEOs vary between 1.2 million and 5.3 million, and it increases to 7.4 million in 27-28. The list of entities are also provided on the slide. Next slide. The largest program 4 of this department, Research and Development and Support, spent 57% of the total vote budget, of the total program budget. Transfers amounts to 92.4%, of which 22 departmental agencies receive funding for current spending and 2 agencies for capital spending. 5 public corporations and private enterprises receive transfers for current spending, and 9 non-profit institutions receive transfers for current spending. Despite the high proportion of funds transferred, the department also spent on consultants. Some of the bigger amounts within goods and services are for property payments and travel and subsistence. Next slide. Members, the objective of Programme 4 is to provide for, amongst others, for the development of representative high-level human capital. To do this, the programme transfers 98.8% of its budget to other institutions to award several bursaries, and to maintain the number of research infrastructure grants at 25 over the medium term. So the question is whether this function is not better suited for the Department of Higher Education, for example. The innovation also include the increasing of the total available broadband capacity provided by the South African National Research Network. The question again is whether this is not the function of the Department of Communication and Digital Technology. Next slide. So members, the table shows a key set of indicators linked to the main focus of the department, contributing to outcomes 8, 9, and 14. The key set of indicators do not reflect the medium-term development plan indicators and targets, and the department is not included as a supporting institution for outcome 14, which is social cohesion and nation building. The budget numbers should not be allowed as performance indicators as shown in this table. So what this means is that the department link themselves to indicators that they are not, which are not indicators of the medium-term development plan. Next slide. Members, departments that transfer less than 60%, as I indicated, if you do budget analysis, one should actually treat departments that transfer more than 60 and less than 60 differently. So departments that transfer less than 60% of their appropriations to other institutions, and we included a quick review of the police services that only transfer 1.1% of their budget and use 96.5% on current expenditure items, which includes COE. The next slide. Members, the compensation of employees are the largest expenditure item in the economic spending structure of the police services, which amount to 80.8% of total spending on average over the medium term. Due to the COE being the main cost driver in police, the next slide will show the trends within the organizational structure and how the police services ensure safer communities and increased business confidence. Next slide. The majority of officers, 73%, are on levels between 1 and 6 and earn on average 400,000 per year. We can, the numbers within this salary and all others is contained throughout the 5-year medium-term period, which my colleague also indicated in the socioeconomic section. The 5th salary level, other, consists of 8 officials, of which 4 are in administration and 1 in each of the other programs. You can see the error in terms of the other, and this error also is throughout all the programs. You can see this error in terms of the unit cost in the other category. Next slide. Members, due to the fact that police services are dependent on the performance of the officials and not other institutions, it is important to understand the services provided. A summary of the observation from the annual performance plan is that the reflection of the internal environment of the police services in 2025, in the 2025 annual report, annual performance plan, is comprehensive and identified key elements within the context of the organizational effectiveness paradigm. It is noted that several new indicators have been developed to respond to the key elements required for organizational effectiveness. Although the APP responds to some of the key elements identified in the analysis, the department did not adjust key data sets reflected in the 2025 budget accordingly. One of this is the consideration of a weighted distribution of approximately 10,000 recruits per annum that highlights the need for entry-level recruitment to be supplemented with upward mobility through promotions. And this we can't see in the table that we indicated with the COE numbers. The APP responds to this key element, but the personnel numbers and cost by salary level and program presented in the 2025 budget remains unchanged over the 5-year period. The target set for the selected performance indicators by program in the 2025 budget is not in line with the targets presented in the APP. The budget is a public document and is used by researchers for budget analysis, and one should actually expect that the department provide errata in terms of these errors that exist in the budget document. Thank you, honourable members. Next presenter.
Thank you very much, Dr. Andy. Good morning once again. This is Dr. Mukundi Mapangwa. I'm going to take you through the last few sets of slides. I'm going to be discussing issues around strengthening state capacity through operational spending, governance reforms, as well as legislative updates. The slides spans areas of operational efficiency in the public sector, transforming of key state institutions, updates as well. I'm also going to provide updates on the ESCOM debt relief, as well as the proposal of the public sector pension related bills. Next slide, please. Yeah, on this slide, we show that the institutional capacity is not simply a matter of increasing sort of funding. South Africa has over 700 public SOE, is including public entities that are mandated to support economic transformation, providing infrastructure and services on which the economy relies on. Well, yet persistent inefficiencies in these entities have been identified, and these inefficiencies undermine the potential impact that the government can do. The state had committed to introducing an overarching legislation on SOEs as far back as 2021-2022, and to centralize governance models to ensure consistency, maybe in issues like salary levels, salary structures, and performance framework. However, but despite all these commitments, the implementation has lacked. The expenditure, for example, by GTEC, revealed a more serious concern that even when these assessments are done, the basic data on expenditure and outputs remain a bit weak, fragmented, and sometimes unavailable. So without reliable data, drawing meaningful conclusions at times makes reform a bit impossible. So this is a matter that I think Parliament should not take lightly, to ensure that the Parliament should ensure that there are adequate information systems that ensure that there's administrative oversight, to ensure that there's accountability, and that we achieve the desired oversight. Next slide, please. On this slide, on state capacity, we're showing that as of 31st March 2025, the national government reported that there are 411,000 posts, as well as an additional 4,400 positions, which makes this a total establishment 415,687, of which 400,307 positions were filled. This is 12,000 less than the same period 5 years ago in 2020. So, the question then remains, do we regard this as vacancies or just redundant structures that, that need proper monitoring and oversight? The South African Police Service, for an example, like my colleague indicated, opted to maintain headcount while implementing cost containment measures. Their commission budget it was cut by 342 million over the 2025 medium-term expenditure framework. They're not downsizing, just that they are focusing on reallocating resources to other areas. But then, obviously, if they're reducing headcount, then it means a potential impact in the crime rate that we have, which is a bit high in the country. A positive example, is what happened at the revenue services, where it transitioned from what it was to a more integrated, digitally tech-enabled and better performing agency. We saw that there was increased allocation to SARS, capacitating not only with funding as well as human capital. So improved revenue performance is the result that came out of that system. So there is a need, if the government intends to increase state capacity, to be able to invest in that regard. Next slide, please. With regards to the public sector, next slide. Okay, I'll continue. Well, the next slide deals with the public sector reform and oversight. The Department of Public Administration but the Department of Public Service and Administration is working on a revised remuneration strategy and framework aiming to align wages with performance over a 5-year period. However, Implementation must be tightly monitored, particularly in sectors like health, education, and justice. The government cannot continue to fund large wage bills without clear linkages to improve service delivery outcome. Furthermore, Parliament's oversight responsibility should include Parliament's oversight responsibility should include periodic reviews of corporate and strategic plans for state-owned enterprises. This was committed by the National Council of Province Committee on Public Expenditure, Public Enterprises and Communication. If these plans exist, are they being used? Are they being monitored? Are there any consequences for non-compliance? Next slide, please. Oh yeah. Furthermore, okay, thank you for that. It's back. Yeah, it's 35%. Yeah, this one. So with the honorable members are also, there are also issues around fiscal. Next slide, please. There are also issues around fiscal oversight, which has several blind spots that have weakened government capacity to manage public resources. I've already spoken to the slides. Please, next slide. This include outdated macro-organizational structures, unresolved public wage negotiations ahead of the budget cycles, and the fiscal capacity of extra budget accounts. Entities such as the Unemployment Insurance Fund, the CETAs, we've seen them, they've been in the news recently, National Skills Funding, Accident Funds, price, or some of these organizations. So there's a need, they're using outdated macro-organizational structures, which needs to be, looked at. And then obviously, there are also findings from the Presidential Advisory Committee on Structural Reforms that has already provided necessary inputs on how government can move forward to address some of these issues. So then the question is that even with all these reviews, spending reviews, and all reports that have been done by specialists, there's a need to follow up to ensure that those processes are actually implemented, and then the results of duplicated in other areas if they're found to be favorable. The 2024, the medium-term development plan 2024-2029 as well calls for better institutional alignment with the Department of Public Monitoring and Evaluation, coordinating reporting through an integrated platform. But this will only be meaningful if it forms real-time course correction, not just annual reviews. So the oversight should be continuous. So it's Parliament's duty to demand that accountability, not just as a bureaucratic function, but as a safeguard to ensure public trust. I'm going to move on to provide an update on the ESCOM debt relief amendment bill. Thank you. Next slide, please. Yeah. So this slide just provides that an update on the ESCOM Debt Relief Act, which was in 2023. The original bill allocation was around 78 billion year one, 66 year two, and as well as 40 billion in the outer year. Additionally, the government had planned and committed towards 70 billion of ESCOM's debt in 2025 to 2026. However, there have been a number of amendments over time. In April 2024, we saw amendments which introduced interest-bearing, that the debt that the guarantee that government was providing to ESCOM came at an interest wherein as the Minister of Finance would then determine the rate. We also saw conditions that were attached to this bailouts. The minister was granted authority to reduce allocated funds if ESCOM failed to meet specific conditions, like there was some fund reserved because they couldn't sell the ESCOM Finance Corporation. So the final 70 billion of the debt takeover was revised to 40 billion in the 2025-2026, 10 billion in 2028-2029 as well as So this resulted in a savings of about 24 billion, which 24 billion than initially projected. Next slide, please. So this slide just provides honorable members an update with regard to this bill, the Public Sector Pension and Related Payments Bill, which is currently before the National Assembly. And so basically the purpose of this bill is to ensure that certain pension-related benefits, post-retirement medical aid, early retirement, and others are clearly and directly charged against the revenue fund. So that is most the purpose of this bill. This then allows for a greater transparency and aligns with budgeting processes with the government's long-term liabilities. It is also streamlines authority, allowing the Minister of Finance to publish proposed amendments to consider public input and then table of final proposal for Parliament to then approve. So this benefit, this new the benefits outlined in this public sector pension-related bill, they represent a growing fiscal pressure point. So there is still a need for government, because if the government fails to account for them transparently and correctly, there is risk of unfunded liabilities when they become due. So if government account for them poorly, it risks the public sector instability. So this bill, its purpose is then to avoid both scenarios. So in conclusion, the pursuit of capable state is not something abstract, but it must be grounded in institutional reforms that are then that government has pronounced on. There's a need for them to be followed through and to ensure that proper oversight is then provided. Thank you.
Thank you so much, colleagues. Thank you, members, Chairperson. In conclusion, Chair, we do emphasize the importance of ensuring priorities aligned within the MTBP. MTBP are supported by robust clear sector plans, monitoring, and that continuous supervision informed by reviews is essential to address evolving socio-economic realities. I think, in responding to Mr. Ryder's question, which I hope I understood, was really to emphasize the importance of ensuring that when you look at the budget itself, allocation sphere, we understand that, but also more importantly, align back with the priorities of ourselves. Otherwise, our concern is that continuously look at the budget in isolation, what it's supposed to do, has really not led us to realize some of the significant improvements that we want to see. We've seen improvements, but we need to see more improvements. In our view, alignment is quite critical between the budget and the what it's supposed to do. Appropriations bill should not be assessed not only on the proportions of allocations here and the daughter as well, vote, but also the impact on what it's supposed to do. Hence, we start by providing socioeconomic context analysis from which the members can see how has this improved or how will this improve over time, and where there's a need to address some of these improvements. It is through this, in our view, that members can propose allocations or additional allocations in future years to address some of the areas. But our concern is that a budget has not always been presented with these in mind. And in our view, that matters a lot. There has to be that convergence. Hence, the importance of showing these dynamics before even showing the numbers themselves. Because in our view, numbers themselves are not as completely as useful for the oversight, because the Parliament, together with the relevant oversight institutions, departments, Munjan Department, Public Service, President should not only peruse the expenditure to identify savings, but should also assess the duplications where the services within the institutions. Also, that's another area where we feel that there's layers of oversight, and it's important to ensure that some of these layers actually lead to inefficiencies. You deal with these layers unnecessarily, and it's important when you look at the deficit revenue and appropriations that are addressed. If required legislation that established institution with duplicated functions should be retracted, or at least should be reformed to ensure that there isn't that duplication or the efficiencies are addressed in that regard. It's very important, Chair, members to recognize that the proposed budget amendments or the current budget may not fully address deep challenges, backlog, constrained public service, and slow economic growth. And that for us is important to, this is the first budget of the term, important to understand where we are, and as we build on to the next 4 or 5 years, we understand the context from which budget is presented. Members, and Chairperson, and colleagues, thank you so much for the opportunity. We'll stop here and wait for the classical questions from the members. Thank you so much, Chair. I give it to you. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Prof. Jantjies. Honorable members, now that we have been given an independent and objective and evidence-based analysis by the PBO, and their research is honestly enhancing our ability to be able to scrutinize the current budget, I am now going to hand over to members to ask or seek clarity or make a comment on the presentation that have been put before us. I see members from the provincial legislatures are also more than welcome to participate in the meeting. By no order of priority, whether members or provincial legislature members, all of you are welcomed. You'll be treated equally in this meeting. Honorable Ryder, you'll be the first as your hand is up. Honorable Siwisa, Honorable Brits, and then Honorable Majola. 4 hands noted for now. Honorable Ryder, you may start.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues. Thank you very much indeed. Chair, I'm a little bit irritated this morning, and I did put a question in the chat asking if this is a presentation on the fiscal framework or on the division of revenue, because frankly, I think more than half of the time was wasted unpacking the same issues that were addressed in the fiscal framework, instead of facing the very real issues that we deal with in the NCOP, which focus on provinces and municipalities. And I think that frankly, in my view, it's almost as if the PBO has put out a straw man for members to attack, so that we can, you can irritate us into making comments on that, instead of focusing on the real issues that sit before provinces and municipalities, which is our mandate to address. And so, Chair, I'm a little frustrated, and I've noted Dr. Jantjies' response to my question in the chat, where he says, obviously the division of revenue must be perceived in the broader picture of part of the budget. I get that, but to go in, and I think Ms. Mamabolo went to great lengths over a number of slides, and wasted a lot of time, frankly, that could have been spent on actually unpacking real issues that are facing the individual grants in provinces. So I am a little bit irritated with the quality of the inputs today from the PBO chairperson. And frankly, I mean, going back and unpacking the issues around the fuel levy, perhaps the PBO can tell us how much the fuel levy went up, or how much the fuel price went up now that the fuel levy has been implemented. Well, I can tell you it didn't go up, it went down. The fuel price went down by 26 cents this month, and it's projected to go down again next month. And in fact, if one looks at oil futures over 3, 6, and 12 months, all trading below $71.40 per barrel. And the Rand dollar also indicated to trade in a fairly narrow band for the next 12 months between 17.80 and 18.20. So we're looking at great price stability. And if ever there was a way to have a minimalized impact on South African consumers, I think that was the way to follow. This issue's been unpacked as we discussed the fiscal framework, but the PBO seems to have ignored that and continue to take a view on it, which is far from independent, Chairperson, as you implied. It's far from independent, and I'm irritated this morning. Chairperson, let's get on to the actual questions and the engagement with the issues at hand. And the provincial equitable share is a matter that's been under scrutiny for quite some time, and we've consistently had pleas from provinces in our 3-sphere planning session, in our committee chairs and whips engagements, in past appropriations discussions, and going back over the past 5 years. We've had concerns raised about the fact that the provincial equitable share formula is outdated, is not actually addressing real issues, etc. And we see similar issues dealt with in the municipal space, where the equitable shares also, there are questions being raised around the fairness and how it's supposed to be done. Can I ask the PBO, how much information do we have? And we talk about data-driven decision making. How much information do we have about the cost of delivering services in different provinces? So I think it's common cause that the distances in the Northern Cape are far greater than the distances in Gauteng, for example, when it comes to service delivery. And so providing a provincial service, clinics, etc., getting people out to staff clinics in remote areas and so on, just as one example of many. It means that service delivery in the Northern Cape might be more expensive on a cost of delivery perspective. However, we see the pressure urbanization on a place like Gauteng, which comes with its own issues and challenges. And certainly with the migratory patterns of people looking for work opportunities and looking for resources, remaining registered perhaps in their home province, but working in one of the metros, in one of the more developed provinces. What is the actual impact? What is the cost of delivering provincial services, and for that matter, municipal services to different people in different provinces? Now, you unpack the issue of the number of households requiring free services and the fact that this has declined. I thought that was quite an interesting slide. And I'd love to know how much research has been done on how many houses need free basic services versus how many houses are actually receiving it, because it's quite a stark decline, and I think the numbers in the Eastern Cape there had dropped from over a million households down to 260,000 odd households, which I thought was quite an interesting one. Is that because fewer households are qualifying, or people are not registering? Have we done any analysis in terms of the causes driving that reduction? And then let's talk a little bit about municipal services. The white paper on local government has again been highlighted as something that is urgent and being reworked. I think we've seen arguments between this committee and Treasury over years about the fact that a mere 9 or 9.5% of the fiscus is dedicated towards local government. We see similar trends now again. Treasury's responded saying that local government has got their own revenue raising capabilities, and as a result, their allocation of national fiscus is actually in excess of 20%. But that's based on a billed amount rather than a collected amount. And so, what is the PBO proposing in terms of that white paper, in terms of how local government gets funded? Has PBO done any work on a new model or on how funding can work a bit better in terms of that? Chair, it would have been nice to see some information on some more of the conditional grants, but unfortunately the PBO chose to focus on police and science and technology, which have got nothing to do with provinces. So I'm going to leave my questions there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, honorable members. And Honorable Ryder, I don't think PBO had an intention of irritating any of the members of the select committee. And colleagues, we must remember that as we go about discussing this presentation of the PBO, colleagues, yes, we accept criticism, but let it be the one that builds us, that gives us insight, and that will assist both parties, the PBO and members of the select committee, going forward in doing our work. Honorable Siwisa, over to you. You may come in.
No, thank you, Chair, and greetings, Chairperson, and all honorable members, and both from province and from national, and the team of the PBO. Chair, let me welcome the presentation. And I'm happy, Chair, let me just make this one comment. I'm happy that the PBO agrees to say that the introduction of the party levy is going to affect the middle class people, your educators, your nurses, your petrol attendants, your securities. All of those people are going to be affected by the issue of the petrol levy that has been introduced, and how it has also affected that the food basket, the tax-free food basket has also been decreased. I'm happy about that. And another thing, Chair, because this is something that I just wrote down, shared responsibilities, or what we call duplicated functions, because at the end of the day, you don't know who you must hold accountable when it comes to certain things that needs to be done. Are you holding accountable the province or national or local government, which is also something I'm happy that they also mentioned in their summary or in their conclusion, to say that we need to relook the issue of duplicated functions that are done from all three spheres of government. Chairperson, the presentation spoke about alignment of planning and budgeting, and that it needs to be addressed. And I'm going to make an example with water and sanitation. So water and sanitation, national is responsible for infrastructure. Local government is responsible for supply of water. And at the end of the day, you don't know who to hold accountable as NCOP to say that people in Umshwati don't have water, or people in Utukela don't have water, and you can't even speak to the Minister of Water and Sanitation because she's responsible for infrastructure, but not responsible for supply of water when it comes to that. There's a breakage in accountability that has also been addressed by the PBO. So I've got only one question to the PBO. Maybe the others will come when there are responses. Does the current division of functions still reflect optimal service delivery efficiencies, or do we need to do adjustments? Are there any inefficiencies in the intergovernmental allocation system that PBO thinks that Parliament needs to review? Because it's very important that different spheres they communicate to each other. At this moment, it seems as if there's a breakage in communication between the intergovernmental. Local government is doing this, provincial is doing that, national is doing that. Another issue, Chair, that I want to raise, because we've got a problem in local government sphere. Now the allocation, according to the PBO, it says that 9% of the allocation goes to local government. And local government is actually where service delivery is done. Is the allocation sufficient enough to ensure that there is actually service delivery that happens at local government? Because everything that we do, it's ward-based. People that need jobs are in wards. People that need water are in wards. People that need health facilities are in wards. And when we speak about wards, we speak about local government. Is the 9% enough to address service delivery issues at local government level to ensure that our people are actually getting the services that they need? And again, Chair, the issue of local government or municipalities being dysfunctional, how does the PBO think that we need to address the issue of local governments that are not functioning, that always rely on being funded irrespective of whatever support that they're given, but still there is no improvement? How can we make a turnaround when it comes to local government, taking into consideration that the total budget for local government is at 9%? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Sivisa. Honorable Briggs.
Good morning, Honorable Chair, and good morning to all the colleagues. Just switch on my video. There we go. Thank you, Honorable Chair. Taking into account that the PBO was established to support this committee with the implementation of the Money Bills Act and the related matters, I have a few questions where I am seeking the advice of PBO in terms of the reason for existence. Coming to the revenue raising capacity of the three spheres, if the revenue sharing formula be revised in light of the ongoing declining municipal financial sustainability, How will we ensure that we are not, in fact, throwing more money into a bottomless pit while we are not seeing any acceptable outcomes? What is the PBO's advice in this regard? Coming to the conditional grants to provinces, how can conditional grants be used more effectively? And what is PBO's advice on what measures are required to ensure maximum value for money? The evidence of the outcome of the grants do not match currently the amount of the current grants. In respect of the appropriations bill, what is the PBO's advice on how and what measures should be put into place to limit the effect of the timing of wage negotiations and the effect thereof on the equitable share to provinces? And then lastly, coming to the public sector pension related payments bill, what can PBO advise on what is the total cost of this bill and how will it affect the outcome of the equitable share on provinces? Thank you, Honourable Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Brett. Honourable Majola. I think members have been keeping to time. Honourable Majola, you can go as lengthy as you want, but please do not prolong your engagement as usual.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Greetings to colleagues. Madam Chair, in a summary of the report, in particular in paragraph 2, it indicates the need to use, not only in terms of appropriations and allocating to each sphere of government or the vote, but we need to look at the impact in terms of the service delivery, inequality reduction, and economic growth. Madam Chair, that was just a highlight of the summary of the PBO, and concurring with you, Madam Chair, with regard to the evidence-based report that we are discussing today. There are a few highlights that I want to raise. One in terms of the cost of living. We can clearly see, Madam Chair, that just petrol and electricity alone consist of 53% of the wage earned by the workers. Further, Madam Chair, just to highlight on the evidence-based report, 53%, including the discouraged job seekers. Madam Chair, with regards to all those, what I've mentioned, I've looked at the paragraph 2 of the summary, and I look at how we have conducted our appropriation process. Looking at slide 38, Madam Chair, one, we were given the spending pattern of the votes or the departments, where the small business never achieved 100% of their spending. They went as far as 87%. Land reform and rural development, the same case, they've ended up in 89%. Monitoring, planning, and evaluation, 86%. Then it takes me to the current appropriation, the 2025-2026, on slide, I think it's slide 39. And then taking into account the three important issues that were highlighted in the bullet 2, which is the service delivery, inequality reduction, and economic growth. Madam Chair, the votes or the department that are of a service delivery, inequality delivery, and economic growth. I'm talking about the science and technology and innovation, which plays a role in terms of the three highlighted in bullet 2 of the salary. Science and technology, we can see negative 4.3% growth. The very same small business, which according to the previous year failed to spend 100%, we are populating plus 7.1% increase. And then we welcome, Madam Chair, the 18% increase on trade and industry, because they speak to the three issues on bullet 2. Madam Chair, I've got a question with regards to that, to the PBO, to say, was this appropriation, because let me also, before I pose my question, highlight that the unemployment, the slow pace of the economic growth, it is the main contributor of the crime level that we are in now, which force us to populate or appropriate a lot of money to the crime reduction strategies. Then my question is with regards to this appropriation that is in front of us. Yes, it is crime is yes, health is a social ill, where we saw the health department in terms of the doctors' ratio per patient, 2,000 more above than what the WHO is saying. So looking at these appropriations and the challenges, well, I want to check to the PBO, looking at the job and economic growth orientated departments being reduced, or the non-spending with regards to the previous year. When they look at these appropriations, is it gonna take care of service delivery, inequality, and economic growth? Because the more we create jobs, the more the economic growth, we will be reducing on a spending such as the police and what have you. Just that question, Madam Chair, to check as to is the appropriation that we see will take care of the economic growth, unemployment, and equality. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Majola. Honorable Swart, you had your hand up. I don't know if you still want to come in or you are covered by other members.
Yes, thank you. I think the chairperson, thank you. Maybe Dr. Jantjies can just, when my question and if somebody else, alluded to the question, you can just guide me on that one. The first question on the division of revenue bill, chairperson, and I also, Honorable Ryder alluded to this one. Given the persistent collapse in service delivery, especially at municipal level, and I always refer to municipal level because I'm coming out of a municipal background, do the current equitable shares and conditional grants still reflect the reality on the ground? Or are we perpetuating a failed funding model? And that is very important for me. My second question on this one is the 4.6% share allocated to local government. Has this been tested against the actual delivery needs that we really, we're sitting with a challenge in municipalities, especially in the light of the growing informal settlements, the infrastructure decay and water losses at municipal level. And my third question on the division of revenue bill is with the nearly half of the treated water loss in some metros and basic service collapsing in rural towns. Isn't it time for Parliament to demand a performance-linked grants for all municipalities and not just the metros. On the appropriations bill, the biggest line items are still salaries and transfers. But what is the measurable return on this investment for ordinary South Africans? Where are the KPIs for value for money? The second one on that one is only 0.7% of the national appropriations go to capital investment. The question is for me, with the people without jobs, is this how we as a country in infrastructure collapse budgets for the future of our country? And then on conditional grants, why are we cutting grants for informal settlements, upgrading, when the number of shack dwellers is increasing? What is the message, or what message does this send to the urban poor? And then my last question on the public sector pensions and liabilities. What reforms can Parliament introduce to cap runaway liabilities without violating existing commitments to public servants? That is from my side, Lady Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Swart. Mr. Jantjies, Dr. Jantjies, I'll give to you to maybe respond, you and the team to respond to the questions. And remember, seeing that we still have time, if you'll have follow-ups, you'll also be given a chance to do your follow-ups after the responses. Thank you very much. Over to you, Dr. Jantjies.
No, thank you so much, Chair, and thank you so much, members, for the questions. I think just the first reflection is say, look, our presentation covers both the Division of Revenue and Appropriations bill, and hence we know our context is quite wide. But I agree, maybe at times we need to narrow down. But I think what we've said before, Chair, is that, look, at times it's good for members to let us know in advance on areas they want us to cover specifically, and that helps. But I think it's important to understand the invitation from the committee also for us to cover both the Division of Revenue and Appropriations bill. But we do take the comments from the members to please in future do send us specific matters they want us to cover in these presentations. The issue around the allocation and division of revenue within the spheres, certainly when you look at the local government in particular, there is a very strong sense or evidence that shows that the expectations for local government to raise revenue for themselves might be, in some areas at least not fair, which requires the need to look at that formula in particular. And I understand there's been looked at, but I think one of the areas that also were noted by the minister in the budget is the data that was being used. We have not used the latest data there wasn't latest data in all areas in determining allocations. So my view, my recommendation would say maybe there has to be a point by this House, coordinating that debate, specifically focusing on this area. Because I understand there has been an FFCs coming tomorrow. I understand a lot of entities and spectators have done work around this area. And my view is that the NCOP has a good role or can play a role in coordinated discussion to bring it down to the Parliament. And we can contribute to that. We haven't done specifically work around this area and as we have left to FC, but we're happy to contribute to that discussion as a whole. But that it may we do emphasize there's very strong evidence that the expectations for local government to raise revenue has been maybe too optimistic, more so that we've seen decline in socioeconomic areas, we've seen unemployment growing, we've seen the poverty in some of the localized areas becoming more, meaning the households are unable to pay for services, which again brings to the point that about the level of indigent policies, which I'll let the team to respond to it. And I think that's how I want to leave that point, to say we can contribute to that discussion in itself. The issue on the okay, let me stop there. Yes, the issue, I'll stop there and let the team respond to specific points, and I'll come back on some of the monitors that I wanted to respond to in this regard. Dr. Sekatan, do you want to start? And just continue just like that, colleagues, on specific points. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Janjis. There was nothing directed to me, thank you, that I need to respond to. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Nelia coming, and then once Siraj also coming. No, there wasn't a point on okay, because Kakhisha is away, so Siraj will respond to some of the questions there. Nelia coming.
Thank you. I'll respond to one or two of the appropriations questions. I think throughout all the members, one can actually see members are interested in do we spend the money efficiently and effectively. In terms of our appropriation slides, we really try to indicate to members that a huge proportion of the national sphere of government's allocation, which is in the appropriation bill, is actually transferred in the form of conditional grants, to show that how important is conditional grants, because conditional grants actually include most of the spending on infrastructure. You won't see the proportion spent on infrastructure in the appropriations bill, because it's included in the conditional grants, and it's also included in equitable shares, for example. So that's one of the things why we included all the 60%, above 60% and below 60%. And also in terms of to determine efficiency and effectiveness, and also to show members actually how one should go about in doing oversight. Because the oversight is totally different in a department which transfer more than 60% of their budget. So then you will basically do the oversight on either the conditional grants to provinces, for example, education and health, which are the biggest transfers. So the focus of your oversight should then be with education and health, and possibly agriculture and the transport grants, which are the biggest ones on a provincial level and also on a local government level. And then when a department transfer less than 60%, it's a total different ball game. You will really focus on the COE, for example. For what do they produce? Are they effective? Are they efficient? That's why we use the police service as an example, because the police is also has got a big role to play in providing security in provinces. So, are we effective? Are we efficient? Does the situation in provinces are actually responded to in the annual performance plan? The other thing that one of our members asked, so that's also trying to answer your question, Honourable Swart, in terms of do we get value for money? And one of the other members mentioned the breaking in communication. What we try to show also in science and technology, for example, they don't even know to which medium-term development plan outcomes they should link their outputs and their budget to. So there's a huge break in communication between the department or between the department and its entities, but it might also be a big break in communication between the Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation and Science and Technology, if they don't know which outcomes they're actually supposed to contribute to. In terms of the cutting of the conditional grant, in terms of informal settlements and upgrading partnership, it was also Honourable Swart. Honourable Swart, that grant is also part of the changes to the conditional grants, and you can see over the medium term it's also reducing. and that grant will be included with the Human Settlements Development Grant. So it's part of the reforms in terms of the conditional grants. Thank you. I can hand over to Siraj.
Go ahead,
Yes, I'm here. Thank you. Honorable members, yes, I wanted to do a quick response to Honorable Ryder and the question of the fuel levy and the situational analysis that we provide in this presentation. And just to say that the situational analysis is mostly done by the cluster, the economics cluster within the PBO that I head, and the goal of the situational analysis, whether it's in the fiscal framework or within the discussion of the Division of Revenue Appropriations Bill, is to provide a broader economic sense linked to the developmental needs of the country and the role the government plays within the developmental process in the country, to show the impacts of the fiscal framework and how it's linked to the overall situation on households, and then how that then has an impact on those at the receiving end of the Division of Revenue and Appropriations. And so the bigger economic picture linked to the development of the country is that what we've seen with the austerity mindedness and the fiscal consolidation, but over even a longer period within South Africa, is that the backlog, the stock of backlogs, that flow that happens every year because of underfunding to every province and every local government in this country on education, housing, the social grants and services, has built up and built up. And in order to understand the waste, the inefficiency and other things, one has to take more than just an on-the-ground look at what's happening within local governments and who's stealing and who's wasting, but an overall satellite view or eagle eye view from above to say, well, what is the impact of long-term under-resourcing on capacity to govern and to deliver? And I think what we're seeing is a huge disarticulation between the State of the Nation address, the medium-term development program and budget, and the actual budgets, and then what revenue or what spending is allocated, whether it's through transfers or whether it's directly. And so this is for us a really important issue, and at the risk of irritating members, I think it's an issue that needs to come up over and over, as it shows very clearly that link between the choices made with the fiscal policy framework and the division of revenue. I know there are lots of issues that we want to get into in much more detail, and we try to do that in later parts of the presentation and other parts of the presentation, but I think it's really important to say that. Then on the issue of the fuel levy, I think what happened is that it became a theme across slides because it was a current issue at the time, and it's such a huge cross-cutting issue. We weren't trying to push for a certain view, particularly on the fuel levy. But I think if we look at what's happening, say, for instance, with the floods in the Eastern Cape, or the floods that happened in KwaZulu-Natal earlier this year, or the droughts that the country, different parts of the country suffer from, there are also environmental cross-cutting issues. There's unemployment as a cross-cutting issue, and all of these affect. One is the ability of households to be resilient, and also then highlight the lack of resourcing for delivery that then affects educational outcomes, health outcomes, and other things. And also then we are pointing to, basically, if you look at specific issues, the fiscal multipliers linked to health, education, providing social grants, and those things, those are actually really high across Southern Africa, across developing countries, and it's higher behind South Africa as well. That these are areas where the fiscal framework could improve, and we could see better outcomes at the local level, and possibly better resourcing and capacitation within local and provincial governments. So on the actual fuel price, I was very happy to hear the detailed inputs from Honorable Ryder. I was about to say Professor Ryder, Honorable Ryder, on what the expectations are for the fuel price and for the rand. And I'm actually glad to hear that somebody is so certain about the future, even if it's over the next few months. We're seeing the war in Israel and Iran. We see the threat to close the Strait of Hormuz. We see the worst case scenarios of oil going to 120, 125 dollars a day. And then the good scenario saying, no, it may actually come down and there may not be an impact and that Iran may not close the strait because they depend on it, but also the US will spend warships. But there's a huge uncertainty. What happened to the rand during when Russia attacked Ukraine, we went to 18 and we basically stayed at around 18, 19. We came down to 14, 15 at the time, the July 21 events, the unrest. The rand went from 14 to 15, but then quickly recovered in 21. But it was the 22, the Ukraine war, that basically had a much longer term impact. And there were issues in value chains, cost of living issues, also the sentiments about emerging economies overall, not only South Africa, and also how South Africa's futures and things are bundled with other developing countries within global currency futures and other futures markets, equities and other things, and how these things are sold and bought or sold. So I'm not as certain about the future and the oil price. I am worried that the oil price could go up and that the fuel levy could have a negative impact, but I'll stop there. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Mukundi, do you want to come in on the specific issues there?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Yankes. Well, there were some questions around the public sector. Yeah, the question was from Honorable Swart as well, that what reforms do Parliament intend to introduce to reduce that but that Parliament can sort of come up to ensure that the cost, retirement benefits cost do not continue to be out of control. So Parliament basically has a number of issues, a number of processes through its oversight process to ensure that there are funds that are specifically ring funds related to pension benefits and other benefits as outlined in the bill. But it is good to know that Treasury did indicate that there is adequate resources. The funding is solvent in that regard, so they're not quite worried about that. So that's why they are pushing for transparency, so that everyone, even including the public, can have access to this number, to see how government is faring, how it's handling its retirement pension benefits. Additionally, there were also questions regarding just generally around local government and the allocation thereof. That is only 90%, whereas there are a lot of issues happening in local government as outlined as well by Honorable Ryder. Urban immigration towards that area, that there are pressures within metros as opposed to maybe to rural municipalities where they've got their own cost issues, like own problems, issues around attracting required necessary skills and issues around raising their own revenue. All these are issues. That is the purpose of reviewing the white paper. So some of these issues are addressed there, and then that process where we are keeping a close look at it. But as the PBO for now, we have not done any work on it. We're just keeping tabs on it as the process unfolds. And then once maybe there are concrete steps or proposals that are coming, then that is when we can provide our point of view on those particular items. Thank you.
Thank you so much, colleagues. Just to add some of the points, Chair and members, definitely when you look at local government performances generally, and also governance issues, there's certainly a need for ensuring there's capacity in municipalities over and above capacity, technical capacity. You find that This is really for me a structural point, because previously we had discussions around, how do we ensure municipalities are able to deliver on services? There's a revenue part to it, but also there's a element of ensuring that there's capable people in the roles, and also focusing a lot ensuring that they can deliver on services. And I think that also bodes quite important for the oversight in the change that you have for local government, ensuring those oversight. We've got district, metro, and we've got provinces, but also national, how those mechanisms are really enabling oversight over local government, but also ensuring that there's proper capacity, ensuring that people who lead municipalities are capable or they understand the roles, but also there's an oversight mechanisms. Because one of the issues that I've seen in the agency report is the importance of governance within the local government themselves. There's to function those governance infrastructure of council and how those functions. But no doubt, chair members, there is also strong view, a strong sense of the allocation itself not being sufficient enough for municipalities, but in rural areas, to deliver on the services that they ought to do. The point around wage negotiations, look, I mean, it's a simpler way to say, once there's a contract or wage agreement, government has to stick to it, and also the labor has to ensure that they stick to that. Government, we're not really much involved in that, but I do see at times the allocation or the spending around that is not consistent with what's agreed on. But it's easier to say when the Ministry of Finance agreed on the wage deal with the sector or the labor organizations, we all stick to that in that regard. The issue of cost of service delivery to local government, cost of delivering government services, I find that is a very actually useful point. It could be a good exercise as part of in determining whether sufficient allocation really is done for various sectors, particularly when you look at different, because the perception is that the more other provinces, when you look at Eastern Cape, which are very geographically dispersed, there hasn't always been taken into account how the province is vast space, but also the Eastern and Northern Cape as the chairs. But I think my point is that would be a good exercise to do, to determine whether the cost of steel and services has been taken into account in full in the allocations. But I think that really come back to a broader question around how is the current model of allocating national raised revenue efficient or reliably providing fair equitable shares. And I still strongly feel this House has an important role to drive the conversations around that. The point, I think that's most of the questions that we were asked. Think more money. Is a need for more money to be allocated in the sectors, and more important. I think that is why when this is why when we argue that moving away from seeing the budget as rent and cents itself, but more in terms of how it improves on the priorities or on the targeted outcomes, that can really elevate the discussion beyond just being, are we getting more money, are we getting value from the money that we send out? So let me pause and give Tsepo to respond to.
Sorry, Professor Jantjies and Chair, there was one question because I got caught up with the oil price, I forgot to cover from Honorable Ryder, if I may.
Yes, go ahead, Silas. Yes, quickly.
Okay, thank you very much. Sorry, the question that Honorable Ryder asked was about the households that need free services. And I think what we have said in the past is and shown through different means, including looking at the income expenditure surveys, levels of unemployment, that the needs for households, given the levels of income, even people working at minimum wage in this country, there's still a need for that high level of access to free services, and that the decline in access to free services is actually a problem linked to a broader overall governance issue, but also certain academics have raised the point that some local governments, as they run into funding problems, will try to make it more difficult for households to get access to services, and we've said this in the past, and then be able to allocate that money to other activities. The issue of what is affordable and what kind of standard of living is required, the Public Affairs Research Institute just brought out a report this month where they make the point that there's never been an attempt to quantify exactly what level of services required to support a higher standard of living and facilitate new livelihood opportunities, and at what these costs these services would be affordable for low-income households. And they say these are concrete benchmarks that are needed to guide policy in the right direction. And I think that is an important issue for the committee and members to raise with the COGTA, the National Treasury, and other parts of the executive to bring that kind of work and to integrate that into sort of those kind of benchmarks. That is not something I think we have the capacity or capability as a PBO to do, but something we can assess and analyze once it's brought to us. But that I think is a bigger role that cuts across many government departments and should be one of the key questions that the executive raises when we look at developing budgets, divisions of revenue, but also the fiscal policy framework. Thank you, Dr. Yankee. Sorry, Tsepo, to butt in.
Tsepo, come in. Thank you, Siraj. Tsepo, come in.
No problem at all. I just wanted to respond, and Siraj has responded to the question that was asked by Honorable Ryder about the indigent, why we're seeing a significant decline in terms of indigent households. Indeed, Siraj has covered that question comprehensively. Just to add that there's also, Siraj spoke about the governance sort of issues, and as well as the issues around the mere fact that municipalities are utilizing funds that are allocated to the equitable shares formula that are supposed to be subsidizing indigent households in order to fund other priorities, and which is why for a couple of years we've been quite vocal about the need to review the white paper on local government to ensure that local government is able to provide services. But there's also a big issue around municipalities' inability to be able to identify indigent households, and this is due to things such as an outdated data migration system or a lack of a clear criteria of what constitutes an indigent households, along with other issues around infrastructure constraints, where we saw that municipalities have not been rolling out infrastructure projects that will be adequate to be able to provide basic services to communities. I'll leave it there. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, colleagues. Chair, thank you so much. We're looking for further follow-up questions. Thank you so much, Chair.
Thank you, Team PBO. Honorable members, in no less than 2 minutes each. Do you have any follow-up, maybe, because we still have time? In the absence of such, let me take this opportunity and thank all
Yeah,
of you.
my hand is up. My hand is up, please.
I'm sorry, Honorable Ryder, I did not notice your hand. You may come in.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. And in the absence of other hands, I'll take the 2 minutes from everyone else as well, and then I'll use about 10. No, just teasing, Chair. Thank you for the responses. In spite of the disappointing fact, PBO seems to think members need to be retrained every 2 weeks, but and we won't get into the cute responses. But let's get into some of the material stuff that came through. And I want to start perhaps with Dr. Olandi's bringing up the issues around the way grant funding is handled, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the key accomplishments of this committee over the past couple of years has been to convince the executive to amend the MIG, Municipal Infrastructure Grant, to include things like maintenance, et cetera, et cetera. And that was a strategy that this committee first started to punt way back, 6 years ago almost. And we've seen it implemented. I was wondering if perhaps PBO has any information that can tell us, since that has happened, how, and certainly I don't expect you to have it on hand today, but perhaps to do a little bit of investigation and see how that expenditure on maintenance of infrastructure is happening and how it's progressing, as opposed to using MIG exclusively for building the initial building phase of infrastructure. So it would be quite useful to see, has that maintenance aspect been adopted by municipalities? Are they spending, or is this again further issues where we find money being returned to Treasury at the end? I'm glad Dr. Mohammed came back in at the end, because he and Tsepo, I didn't see your surname on your your name on the link, but perhaps you can tell us your surname at some stage, maybe in the chat, and then we can see that. But I think you guys have gotten to the nub of what I wanted to get at, and what I was asking when I spoke about the white paper and the equitable share. It appears to me that equitable share is not being used for what it was intended to be used. And equitable share is probably funding BMWs and Mercedes-Benzes instead of funding essential services. Now, I know that there is no laid down, you may only use equitable share for X, Y, and Z, because I think that there's an acknowledgement by Treasury that situations differ so vastly in terms of different municipalities that they can't be too prescriptive in terms of determining what equitable share is used for at municipal level. But certainly I think where it's being abused is something that we need to highlight. So has PBO got any ideas in terms of what might work as kind of a prescribed basket? Maybe give us an indication of number of registered indigents across the different municipalities, etc. But kind of give us an indication. We are legislators. We need to change the way things are done. It's quite clear equitable share is not being used for what it's supposed to be doing, because that basket, or those households receiving the basket of free services, is decreasing so rapidly. Where's the money going? The information should be freely available in terms of municipal Section 71 reports that are sent to Treasury on a monthly basis. I heard what Dr. Mohammed said, they lack capacity. There's a big team there. There's 15 staff in the PBO office. I'm sure that something this important could receive some attention, and we can have a look and see, is equitable shares. I mean, this is what we had to discuss. DORA, the giving out of equitable share. Is it being used properly by municipalities, or is it really just money that's being wasted? That's what we need to understand, if not today, certainly in our next engagement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Rider, PBO.
Chairperson, thank you so much once more. I sense that the Mr. Raya's questions are more of empirical questions. What I would ask is the research colleagues and committee management team to send us those into more of questions that we could look into over a period of time and respond to them given time. I don't want us to speak just off the cuff on these very important questions. So I would like the committee management team to send us those in more of empirical work for the team, and certainly we'll look into those ones, even if not doing the work in all of them, but some ensure that we can coordinate the work that can help the committee. But some, of course, we can do the work ourselves, the team. Thank you so much, Chair.
Dumisani?
Nelia, I see you want to say something. You may come in.
Okay, thank you, Honourable Chairperson. I just wanted to respond to the conditional grants. The PBO do work on the conditional grants. Annually, we update our analysis, but we are always 2 years behind, because we try and also assess efficiency of the conditional grants, because we compare the performance and the expenditure with each other to determine efficiency. And in many of our previous analysis and assessments, we've actually indicated the poor reporting on conditional grants. And again, Honourable Ryder, in terms of the MIG grant, maintenance is only part of the roads, if they spend on roads. The outputs in DORA does not reflect maintenance separate, so it will be very difficult to get the information. And also one of our responses previously that we indicated that in terms of roads, for example, if we go into the most detailed database on the DPME database on performance on roads, for example, the output that they reflect is we do a report has been provided, and we've also indicated that in many instances that that should not be allowed. Those reports should then be published on, for the example, the Department of Transport or responsible departments. It must be published. So those reports are not available, and the performance output is reflecting that we've produced a report. So for us, in doing the analysis on the conditional grants annually, we update them, and the first one will come out soon, members, the one on agriculture, the performance on agriculture. Yeah, it's very difficult. We go back to annual reports. We use the DORA. We use information from the Treasury, because also currently the Treasury is basically just monitoring the expenditure on conditional grants. There's actually no institution that is really focusing on the performance of conditional grants in terms of the monitoring, because the DPME is responsible for monitoring the performance of government, and they do not have any reporting on conditional grants at the moment in terms of their database that we consult. Thank you, honourable members.
Thank you, Nelia. Chairperson, thank you so much. Thanks, Nelia. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Team PBO. Honorable members, I am going to request that we remain for the rest of the meeting to deal with the minutes from the previous meeting. And let me take this opportunity to thank Team PBO. From the first day when we got into office in 2014, you've been there with the committee to date, and hopefully going forward, we will maintain the working relationship. Today's interactions, colleagues, reaffirmed the critical role that the PBO plays in supporting Parliament with objective, independent, and professional analysis on fiscal and budget matters. As the committee continues its work for the budget 2025, we appreciate the depth of insight of the office that we have been provided with, especially on issues such as the fiscal sustainability, the service delivery, and the spending trends. And honorable members, we acknowledge the PBO's progress in institutional strengthening and look forward to future engagements that will further sharpen the committee's capabilities and capacity to scrutinize and amend budget proposals in line with the needs of everybody, the people that we are representing, the sectors that we are representing as members of Parliament. And once again, thank you very much, members of the colleagues, members from the provincial legislatures, all the stakeholders in the meeting, PBO, thank you very much. This comes to this first part of the meeting being urgent. Members of the Select Committee, kindly remain behind so that we deal with the minutes. Thank you very much, colleagues.
Thank you so much, Chairperson, members. Much appreciated. Thank you so much.
Mr. Nodada, you will take members through the minutes.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Thanks, members, once again. Chairperson, on the screen is the set of minutes dated 11 June 2025. That day, the committee was briefed by National Treasury on the three bills: Division of Revenue Bill, B15 of 2025, Appropriation Bill, B16 of 2025, and the Public Sector Pension and Related Payments Bill of Bill 3 of 2025. This is the first page, Chairperson and honorable members. second page. Three. Four. Five. Six. Seven. 8. 9. 10. 11. 12. Page 13, which is the last page. Thank you, Chairperson. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nodada. Mr. Nodada, I think it's page 3 or 4, where you referred to Deputy Minister Sarupen as Mr. Kindly give him the correct title, Deputy Minister, so that for future reference, even if somebody has to come across the minutes of this meeting, they'll be able to know who Mr. Sarupen is. Any correction, any input, colleagues, on the minutes? I think it's paragraph 3 or 4, Mr. Nodada. Slide number 3 or 4. Everywhere where you refer him as Mr. Sarupen, just kindly put it there that is Deputy Minister Sarupen for future references and for anybody. Yes, on the paragraphs on the report, I think you'll rectify that. Honorable members, by show of hands, can I get an indication if this is a true reflection of the deliberations that took place in that particular meeting? Honorable Numalo.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning to all the members. I move for the adoption of the minutes as a true reflection with the amendment made. Thank you.
Honorable Numalo moves. Honorable Ndlovu.
Thanks, Honorable Chairperson, and greetings to honorable members in the platform and the appropriation staff led by Mr. Nodada. I second.
Colleagues, the minutes have been duly adopted. This brings us to the end of the meeting. Tomorrow, colleagues, the meeting of tomorrow, as Mr. Nodada has highlighted, because it will be the only meeting that we were supposed to attend physically, so there was no need for members to be traveling to Cape Town. We then took a decision with consultation with your good selves that the meeting be held full virtual, and the meeting will start at 10 o'clock since there's no sitting of Parliament tomorrow. We'll meet tomorrow, colleagues, as we'll be having the same deliberations with the FFC. Thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your afternoon. This brings us to the end of the meeting. Bye.
Long live the Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.